Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday. My name is Ayeesha Sachedina. I'm a partner at Deloitte, and today we're talking about payments on Main Street. So as a part of this panel, we're going to be focusing on three different topics. The first is the evolution of payments over the past few years. The second is the key challenges, right, of this increasingly fragmented ecosystem. And the third is how does it then affect consumers and businesses on the ground. So joining me today to discuss this, I have two esteemed panelists here, Saeidi and Alex Johnson. Ray, would you like to please introduce yourself?
For sure. Hi everyone, Saeidi. I am at Visa Canada within the product team, responsible for consumer credit and loyalty. That encompasses our core affluent products, installments, loyalty, and crypto. Prior to that, I was 15 years on the issuing side of the business, including Scotiabank, CIBC, and HSBC.
Alex?
Yes, happy to be here. Alex Johnson, so I'm at Bank of America. I lead innovation across our global treasury products. So that's anything from payments, receivables, liquidity, all that kind of falls within my remit. Prior to that, I was at JP Morgan, and then prior to that, I was in fintech.
All right, thank you. So let's dive right into it. So let's talk about trends, okay? As we know, the pandemic accelerated the usage of digital payments, including contactless, BNPL. Now over a quarter of Canadians are really comfortable using QR codes to make payments, not just check menus. So what does that mean? What are we seeing, and what are consumers gravitating to post-COVID, right?
Yeah, we definitely saw a huge shift from cash to completely moving away from cash to other payment types. And so to your point around contactless, our limits prior to the pandemic were $100. That was increased to $250 to allow for customers to be able to tap and go. Customers are looking for seamless user experiences where there is no friction. Ultimately, they want to be able to go, figure out what they're looking for, do the transaction and move. We saw a huge shift to digital overall across multiple segments of customers who weren't previously maybe comfortable, including my parents who refused to do online banking for years prior to the pandemic, but got really comfortable with it. And then I would say really looking for an omni-channel experience is the other component of it. So being able to browse, look for something, possibly even make the transaction online, but then be able to go into the store and actually pick it up.
And what about from a corporate perspective, Alex?
Yeah, I think corporates have to serve consumers, right? So I think a lot of what she's already said ties to that. I think as a corporate, you have to think about if you're making payments to consumers, how do you meet their needs in that way from a digital experience, thinking about how you pay to wallets, how you think about paying the unbanked. Obviously, I'm from a bank, so that's weird that I say that, but it is important for our corporate clients to be able to make those types of payments, so it does matter. But then, we also have to think about what's the future, right? What's the future of payments for consumers and even for corporates, right? So thinking about more frictionless payment methods, like what I like to call pay by magic. You hear about, paying with the palm of your hand now. And so we have a responsibility to innovate and think about new ways to create those frictionless omni-channel experiences.
So just following up on that point, as we know, a lot of countries across the globe are focusing on payment acceptance and creating legislation around that. And that becomes even more in focus when you're providing different options, right, to consider all of these digital payment types. So what does that mean then for end consumers and businesses, Alex?
Yeah, so I think regardless of what's happening in the regulation space, the optionality and the new ways of making one-to-one transactions more direct between a consumer and a merchant has already been evolving, right? So thinking about Interac here in Canada, we, Bank of America, have established a pay-by-bank solution in the UK. There's Cody in Mexico, and you name it, right? I could ramble off a bunch, but that's kind of already been happening because it's being demanded by consumers. But there is obviously a challenge for us as issuing banks and as credit card issuers to really innovate in a new way and think about what are those new ways we can serve our customers as things change.
Okay. So we're at a Payments Canada conference. Let's talk a little bit about real-time payments now. So just to level set, 79 countries across the globe have at least one real-time payment scheme. 1/3 of customers said that the availability of real-time payments actually influences their choice of a financial institution, and 4/5 of companies say that RTP will significantly reshape their business. So with that, Ray, what are some tangible benefits to RTP that consumers can expect?
For sure. There's a ton. One is really around access. So being able to access when it comes to payments, real time, quickly, but also looking at the underbank. So this is a factor, for example, in Brazil, where, for example, P2P payments are very much so common in serving the underbanked segment. Data would be the other side of it, so being able to actually provide additional information as part of a payment. So if you're, for example, a small business, being able to include details related to your invoice, the number, who it's going to. So when it comes to end of the month or end of year, and you're looking to reconcile, that information is there. And then I would say reduction in costs, really. So at the end of the day, we do find that typically with RTP, there is typically a lower cost associated as well for customers.
Okay. And Alex, what can companies expect in terms of value-added services from RTP?
Sure. So this is always a very interesting topic for me because I always like to think about this consumerization of treasury, right? Because if you think about real-time payments, for instance, it was really initially the concept was established so that peers could make payments between each other instantly, and there was a demand from a consumer standpoint. But we're now really starting to see where the application comes into play for businesses. Different real-time payment schemes are raising the transaction limit to be able to support that. And so as we think about the areas where this could really evolve for corporates is when you think about supply chain management and cash management, being able to make real-time funding decisions. And I know we don't always like to pay our suppliers early, so how can you make that last minute payment to get it in on time, right? So that you can manage your capital effectively for your own business. So those are two key areas. But then again, tying to earlier, we also have to think about the consumer angle of that, even from a corporate standpoint. How do we leverage that to, if for instance, payroll, thinking about having more real-time access to your payroll. And especially when you think about gig economy workers, hourly employees who potentially are living paycheck to paycheck and need more real-time access to those funds, and then just how we serve our consumers from like a business standpoint if we're paying out to a consumer, and the same trends you've talked about.
Okay. So further to that point of mixing the consumer and corporate and really being able to structure corporates to touch their end consumers and serve them better, we're seeing the growth of embedded finance, right? And a lot of corporates are partnering up with whether it's fintechs, banks, networks, to offer financial services to their clients. So part of this is to understand them better, right? To being able to offer more services to them. But where do we see the financial services ecosystem going from this? Right, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think we're going to see that more and more. There's going to be a complete shift in terms of customers wanting more and more in terms of digital experiences, and ultimately, whoever is serving those customers need to actually go where the customer is. It's no longer a matter of waiting for the customer to actually come to a specific store to be able to determine what they want. So I think a big piece of that, though, from a technology perspective, is making sure the platforms that are available are scalable, flexible, and actually able to be able to serve that type of functionality. But also really focusing on, to your point, that not everything has to be done in-house. There's the opportunity for partnerships. So look at where there are core functionalities that you're able to do well, but how do you partner with players that really excel in that space? And so that becomes more and more critical, I would say.
Alex, what about from your perspective?
Ditto. No, but really, I mean, I agree entirely. You're not alone, right? In this, there's so much technology that exists out there. Us as a bank, we provide services to our clients, and even for some of that, we're partnering, right? I always like to talk about this ecosystem that exists between fintechs and banks, right? And to your point of like where it goes from here, that's going to continue to exist, right? I think the thing from my perspective is, we leverage that technology because a financial technology company has created a niche. So why would we not take advantage of that? And then we kind of serve as that tool to kind of bring those technologies together for holistic solutions for our clients, that embedded finance, plug and play type of need where we can offer those kind of services.
Do you think from a global perspective, do you think that we are, as North America, are kind of behind the trend in this? Or like you see China, right, and WeChat and these embedded finance experiences have been active for years, right? So, but here not so much. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a couple of things. I think open banking, I think, is very important in this, right? Having the access to being able to easily connect to various APIs for payments, for data. But the other thing that I think really matters when it comes to driving these kind of trends is I actually think government support and sponsorship makes a really big difference in these markets, where in the US, it's kind of the responsibility of the financial institutions, the fintechs, the banks to kind of come up with these solutions on our own. And so I think that kind of environment where you have a central bank that creates that ecosystem for those types of solutions to thrive, and they really push it into their communities and drive adoption, I think that makes a world of difference.
Okay. So we just had Abraham here talking to us about open banking. So let's talk about that a little as well. So it's a focus for many companies and many countries across the globe. And so the reality is, though, that although a lot of companies want to use their data, they still don't know how, and there are, as Abraham mentioned, still privacy issues for consumers, right? So how can consumers and businesses really take advantage of open banking effectively, right?
From a consumer perspective, I think being able to have access to your data, being able to know exactly your rights becomes very critical. So knowing what your rights are in terms of data usage, in terms of even deleting data becomes critical. But at the end of the day, it benefits the customer because now there's going to be likely better types of solutions out there based on the data that's provided. And there's going to be players that will be getting into the space that previously may not have been able to get into the space. So more choice ultimately to the end consumer. And then I would say, really, there's going to be way more customized, personalized types of offers that will be going to customers, and more, everyone's attention span is reducing. So really making sure that what you're receiving in terms of offers is very much so specific to you and what you're looking for becomes so important, and ultimately that will help.
So Ray, are we just going to all become MarTech companies, effectively?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
Alex, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, I think from an open banking standpoint, APIs is really the core of what the value is for a corporate, right? You can create these embedded experiences within your existing platforms when it comes to checkout, both from online and a brick and mortar standpoint. You can make these very frictionless experiences for your customers, which will, reduce abandonment, increase sales. I mean, I don't know about people here, but how many of you, since we've kind of been able to drive APIs and use wallets and things like that, feel like maybe you're spending a little bit more money because it's a little bit easier. So it's about creating those seamless, frictionless experiences for your customers. But also from a data perspective, if the consumer allows for you to have access to their data, it does provide for really personalized, customized experiences, right? You can target ads, you can just create, just the user journeys that are more relevant to the customers that you're trying to direct those to.
What will we think it'll do to competition, though?
It will definitely increase competition, I think. Look, at the end of the day, when there is room for innovation, I think everyone benefits. And so, the players that are involved ultimately become more creative and think broadly and start innovating. And really, at the end of the day, the end consumer also really benefits.
Okay. All right. So we're going to take our final question now. thinking about global best practices and trends, and as we talked about initially with the pandemic, we saw a whole rise in new customer experiences, right? So looking ahead, what do we think is next for consumers? There's Kara Swisher's least favorite topic, the metaverse, all the way to digital assets, all the way to new experiences. So what do you think is going to stick, and what can we expect?
At the end of the day, like the continuous use of digital will continue. The continuous improvement to user experiences, removing friction will absolutely continue. And I think payment options and giving more choice to the customer will be critical. So for example, buy now, pay later being something that we saw a huge rise during the pandemic. And it's becoming table stakes in terms of what customers are looking for. And I think being able to provide that through a seamless way to customers becomes very important. As well, I think the whole embedded commerce is here to stay. And so ultimately, looking at businesses and how they can optimize that experience is also something that will continue.
Alex, what about you?
The general theme of what's going to continue to drive things forward is frictionless, right? I think that's kind of, if you look at the progression of where we've gone in the payment space, it's just how do we become more and more frictionless. Again, speaking about the payments by magic, it's like absolutely frictionless. But like within that realm, the things that I think kind of drive from I really do speak a lot from a corporate and a treasury standpoint, the 24/7 world, 24/7, 365 world that we live in now and will continue to push, everything in real time, the Internet of Things, being able to touch and grab in an instant, that's going to drive a lot of innovation going forward. There's also the topic that I think we've talked about quite a bit, this consumerization of treasury. And partly what I think about in that as well is as we talk about these consumer trends, real-time payments, wallets, embedded banking, all of those items, you have to think in a corporate standpoint, yes, maybe I'm making a business-to-business transaction in that environment, but it's still two people on the end of that transaction. So you have to think they're going to want the same experiences, right? So I always keep an eye on what's happening in the consumer space because not always fast follow, but at some point in time it does hit the corporate space. And even if you think about things today, like ChatGPT, not that, and I don't condone ChatGPT in any way by saying this, I feel like I need to disclaim, but just the point I'm making is that's a very consumer-driven technology. It's me and you going online and asking for plan my vacation for me or write me a job description, right? But now we're starting to think, okay, how do we use that same technology in a business concept, or in a business context? We're just starting to touch on that. So again, just kind of tying to that consumerization driving those trends. And then lastly is around the digitization piece, which ties this all together, I think, because in order to do all those things, you have to get rid of manual processes, get rid of paper, move to digital, move to automation, and make things more efficient.
Okay. Thank you both very much. All right.